He was standing by the water, doing something simple, something peaceful, on land that had been his for decades. But to them, his presence alone was enough to trigger suspicion, authority, and a call to the police. No questions asked. No proof required. Just assumptions shaped by power, privilege, and skin color. What began as a quiet afternoon by a lake turned into a public accusation that would expose a lie worth millions. And when the truth finally surfaced, it destroyed an entire community's illusion of control. How far would they go to protect a lie they never owned? What happened next revealed who really had power, and who never should have had it in the first place. Before that day, life was quiet in a way most people never notice until it's gone. He wasn't flashy, loud, or looking for attention. He liked early mornings, strong coffee, and the calm that came from being near water. The lake wasn't a hobby or a weekend escape. It was part of his life, passed down, cared for, protected long before the neighborhood existed. Long before fences, signs, and rules appeared overnight. Most days followed the same rhythm. Work, responsibilities, then time by the lake to clear his head. Fishing wasn't about catching anything. It was about stillness, about control in a world that constantly tried to take it away. He knew every curve of the shoreline, every change in the water, every season it went through. This place grounded him in a way nothing else could. But as the neighborhood around the lake grew, something else grew with it. Eyes that lingered too long. People who watched instead of waved. A quiet tension that sat in the air, unspoken but heavy. The homeowners association made rules quickly, confidently, and loudly. They posted signs, built paths, and acted like authority came from volume alone. And slowly, the lake stopped feeling like a refuge and started feeling like a test. He noticed how differently he was looked at compared to others doing the same things. The same fishing. The same walking. The same silence. Only his presence seemed to bother people. Only his actions needed permission. Still, he kept to himself, believing truth had a way of protecting those who carried it. He had no idea that a single accusation, shouted across the water, would turn routine into chaos, and expose just how fragile their control really was. The shift happened fast, the way it always does when power decides it's uncomfortable. What began as quiet ripples on the water turned into raised voices, pointing fingers, and phones held up like weapons. A woman across the lake stopped walking and stared, her expression tightening as if his presence alone was an offense. She didn't ask questions. She didn't hesitate. She acted. Within seconds, authority was being summoned, not because of what he did, but because of who he was. He felt it before he fully understood it, the familiar tightening in his chest, the calculation every person like him learns early. Stay calm. Don't react. Don't give them a reason. He reeled in his line slowly, aware that eyes were now on him, watching every move, waiting for a mistake that could justify their assumptions. The air felt heavier, charged with judgment and certainty that did not belong to them. The HOA officers arrived first, confident and loud, walking toward him like they already knew the ending. Their presence wasn't about facts or fairness. It was about control. They spoke with rehearsed authority, treating him like an intruder in a place he had known longer than any of them. Behind them, the woman stood tall, satisfied, enjoying the attention, enjoying the power of being believed without proof. Neighbors gathered quickly. Phones came out. Whispers spread. The same people who had walked past him silently for years were now watching closely, curious to see how this would end. He felt exposed, reduced to a spectacle. Not a person fishing. A problem to be handled. The HOA tried to seize his fishing rod, crossing a line that had nothing to do with property and everything to do with entitlement. Then the Real police arrived, lights flashing, sirens cutting through the quiet neighborhood. That sound changed everything. For him, it meant risk. For them, it meant validation. The woman rushed forward, eager, rehearsing her version of the story before anyone asked. He stood still, steady, knowing how quickly situations like this could turn dangerous. One wrong assumption. One wrong move. History had taught him that. When he handed over his identification, the moment stretched. The officer looked at it, then back at him, then again at the scene unfolding around them. Something shifted. Not outrage. Not sympathy. Recognition. The woman didn't notice. She was too busy claiming ownership, insisting rules applied differently to him. The HOA doubled down, speaking over him, correcting him, issuing violations that meant nothing on paper but everything in public. The officer asked questions. Simple ones. Who owned the lake? Who authorized the rules? Confidence began to crack. The certainty they arrived with started to wobble. He watched their faces change as facts replaced assumptions. When he reached into his truck and pulled out the folder, the energy shifted completely. This wasn't panic. This was preparation. Years of knowing this moment might come. As documents were revealed, murmurs grew louder. Pride turned to confusion. Authority turned to fear. The truth surfaced slowly, painfully, stripping away the story they had told themselves. This lake was never theirs. The rules were never valid. The power they wielded was borrowed and misused. And as realization hit, something darker settled in, the understanding that this wasn't just a mistake. It was deliberate, enforced, profitable, built on silence and unchecked bias. What came next would shatter more than reputations. It would expose a lie so expensive, so reckless, it would leave an entire community reeling. The moment the truth surfaced, the ground shifted beneath everyone standing there. Confidence collapsed into panic. Authority dissolved into silence. The documents in his hands carried more weight than every accusation thrown at him, and the realization hit like a wave no one could outrun. This wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. It was exposure. Faces that once looked smug now looked hunted. The woman who had called the police stood frozen, eyes darting, breathing shallow, as if the crowd she summoned had suddenly turned against her. The HOA officers stopped speaking altogether. They didn't need to. Their posture said enough. Shoulders slumped. Hands trembled. The power they had wielded so comfortably moments before was gone. The officer's demeanor changed completely. Not aggressive. Not skeptical. Focused. Sharp. The kind of attention that signals consequences are coming. The lake was never theirs. The rules were never legal. And the enforcement wasn't just wrong, it was intentional. Every fine, every threat, every public humiliation. All of it stacked neatly into something far bigger than embarrassment. The crowd felt it too. Murmurs grew louder, phones held higher. Neighbors who once stayed silent leaned in, suddenly aware they'd been living inside a lie. This wasn't just about a lake. It was about who gets questioned and who gets believed. Who is assumed guilty and who is assumed in charge. He stood in the center of it all, calm, steady, carrying the weight of a moment that could have ended very differently. Fear flickered briefly, because even when you're right, moments like this are dangerous. A misunderstanding. A reaction. A single wrong interpretation could still turn truth into tragedy. History had proven that too many times. But this time, the facts were undeniable. Paper doesn't flinch. Records don't lie. And bias has nowhere to hide when truth is laid bare. As the officer began discussing investigations, illegal use, and consequences, the word damages floated into the air like a warning shot. The number that followed drained the color from every face involved. Millions. Not hypothetical. Real. Measurable. Deserved. The woman's authority crumbled into desperation, her certainty replaced by quiet terror as she realized the spotlight she loved had become a reckoning. And standing there, watching it all unravel, he understood this moment wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of what the truth was about to cost them. When the crowd finally thinned and the sirens faded, the lake grew quiet again. Not the uneasy quiet from before, but a deeper one, earned, settled, honest. The investigation moved fast after that day. Records were reviewed. Emails surfaced. Decisions that had once been hidden behind authority were dragged into the light. The Homeowners Association didn't just lose credibility. It lost everything it had built on lies. The fines, the illegal structures, the misuse of land, the targeted enforcement, it all added up. Millions in damages. Careers ended. Power dissolved. For him, there was no celebration. Just relief. The kind that comes after realizing how close everything came to going wrong. He returned to the water not to prove anything, but to reclaim peace. The lake was the same, but he wasn't. Being right hadn't protected him from fear. Ownership hadn't shielded him from suspicion. Truth had only mattered once it was forced into view. That's the part that lingers. How easily assumptions turned into action. How quickly authority believed one voice over another. How familiar it all felt. This wasn't only about a lake or an HOA. It was about who society questions and who it trusts. Who gets watched for existing. Who gets punished before being heard. Racism doesn't always shout. Sometimes it hides behind rules, committees, and policies that look neutral until you see who they're used against. He still fishes there now, line steady, eyes on the water. Neighbors pass by and nod, some with respect, some with regret. The truth changed the neighborhood, but it also exposed something bigger. How many times this kind of injustice goes unchallenged because the outcome isn't caught on camera, because the person targeted doesn't have proof in a folder. So the question isn't whether this story is rare. It's how many stories like this end differently. How many never reach the light. And how long we'll keep calling it a misunderstanding instead of what it really is.